Yeah, so I'm Philip Brown. I'm the organiser of Coventry Climate Action Network, and the website is covcan.uk. And Coventry Climate Action Network is an organisation or a group that tries to bring together people within Coventry and the wider area, Warwickshire and towns around, who are interested in climate change or environmental issues or related issues, to try and get people to work together or to be able to plan events or do things like that. And it's been going for a few years. I'm not sure the exact date, but anyway. And we have a website and a Facebook page and stuff like that. So that's who I am. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. So I'm Manon Hilaire. I'm a French student here in Erasmus in the year in exchange here at Coventry University. And in France, I'm studying journalism. That's why I'm interested to try it here in English and to practice it here.
Practice English?
Yeah, and journalism, both.
Okay, right. Yeah.
First, I wanted to talk more about like the Coventry Climate Action, like just why it has been created, its goal and achievements, like just to know more about it.
Well, I mean, climate is obviously a huge issue, climate change, global warming, and we need to, every individual in the world, basically, ideally, needs to take action to reduce their carbon footprint. So from my point of view, I'm only one person involved with this, but from my point of view, the ultimate goal is to get individuals to take individual action within their lives to try to reduce their carbon footprint. But as well as that, we can do a lot of other things because obviously people are organised within companies, within schools, within city councils. And the city council, which is the local government, is a key player in this whole thing. But businesses as well, universities, there are large organisations which can do things and which are doing things, both to reduce their own carbon footprint and to try to persuade citizens and people and visitors to do their things. So there is a lot that can be done. That's why it was set up fundamentally. It was actually the Coventry Climate Action Network, as I understand it, was started within Warwick University. So there's a lady called India Foster who works there, and she first registered, I think she created the Facebook page and did other things. And there is another person within the University of Warwick called David Chapman, who now runs the Facebook page. From my point of view, that's the ultimate goal, is to get individuals to change their behaviour and organisations. But I think because it's a network, we don't expect every citizen in the city to join the network. I think it's a network of those groups who are interested in businesses and other groups who will organise events to try and influence the public. So the ultimate goal is to influence the public, but to do that by organising groups and maybe running activities. There is already a huge amount going on. So, we're trying to support that and encourage it. That's the goal. How far we are successful is a different question, but that's the goal. It's obviously partly successful insofar as you've heard of it and you've come to us to try and find out what we're doing. So we're not completely wasting our time, but I would question how really effective we are. And in fact, just to add a little bit extra, there are groups within Coventry who are already engaged within the network, but the very few of them who actually take part in the discussions, I don't think we've been very effective in bringing them together or publicising their points of view, really. So I'm just now, in the spring of 2020, planning and starting to create podcasts where I will bring on or talk to these groups and let them explain what they're doing. So to give them a voice and to raise the profile of everybody in Coventry who's trying to do stuff. So this is the first podcast that we've done. So I'm glad you contacted us, because it gives me a chance to explain what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. So that's who I am. And what about you? Just tell me a little bit about who you are and what you're trying to achieve.
Well, that's a huge question. I don't know where to begin.
So what, you're a student, right? At the moment?
Yeah, I'm studying political sciences because.
And where?
Well, here at Coventry University, but when I'm in France, it's in Lille, in the north of France.
Okay.
And I've decided to go there, even if it was like really far away from my house, because I really wanted to study that with the journalism school, because I love journalism since like I'm a child. So that's really cool for me, and I'm really glad that I could try it here in English to try to improve it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to become a journalist in the future and to.
But you mentioned political.
Yeah, because it's like a cursus where I'm doing both at the university and at the journalism school. Like it's a specific thing in France, because in France we can enter in a journalism school only after 3 years of university. So I'm doing my 3 years of university. Like right now I'm in my third year. So like next year I will be able to go to a journalism school. And in the meantime, I'm training for the exam, because they're like a huge exam to enter in the journalism school. So I'm training it to be able to enter. Yeah.
Well, I wish you good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
So your course is did you say political science? What course are you on?
Political sciences.
So where does because we're talking today about environmental issues and climate issues. Where does that fit in with the political science? It's not directly linked, I guess, is it?
Not exactly. It's just that I'm really interested in those subjects, so that's like all of it. Not specifically, no.
Okay, good. So you've got some questions you want to ask, I think, have you?
Yeah. I also wanted to ask, how would you consider the environmental politics here in England? Because, like, for example, the UK have voted many laws to considerably reduce the greenhouse gases. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, the government of Boris Johnson is considered as climate skeptic and not doing enough. So I was wondering, how would you consider it?
Well, I mean, I think you know that Britain was the host of COP26 last year in November. And that was a huge effort. And the UK backed it. I mean, people obviously have different opinions about what they did, but I think they did their best to engage with people and to persuade governments to undertake to reduce their carbon footprint. And they had some failures and they had some successes. So it was, I mean, it's not clear, but these things are never huge successes. They're always a mixture. But I think by and large, the UK government has tried to do the right thing. I mean, this is only my opinion. It's not the opinion of the Coventry Climate Action Network. It's tried to do the right thing, for example, by undertaking to phase out the selling of new fossil fuel vehicles. It's given a date for that, to force companies to get their minds around switching over to battery-powered cars, for example. And there are, I mean, I haven't got a list with me of what the government's pledged to do, but certainly it's trying to move towards being carbon neutral. I mean, many governments have undertaken to do that. Unfortunately, the pledges that most governments have made will not achieve what they say they want to achieve. I mean, it's easy to make a promise, but the promises they make are not sufficient. And having made the promises, it's difficult to actually implement them. So a lot of governments are behind implementing the promises that they've already made. I mean, they made promises 4 years ago, which most of them have failed to achieve so far. And, you know, we're moving in the wrong direction. All the COVID business and the economic consequences of that have moved a lot of countries in the wrong direction, because the economic forces, governments are ruled by short-term economic forces because they have to try and get elected. Most governments, anyway. And even those governments that are not democratic still need the support of their people, and individuals, you know, want their lives to get back to normal. They want their economies to continue. They want to have fuel to run their cars and all those kinds of things. So it is. I can understand it's very difficult for governments to do what's necessary. Yeah. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah. I think that's what we're trying to achieve, and where the government, you know, is the government doing what it should do? No. But, you know, if it did what it should do, it wouldn't get elected again. Governments, you know, that did what they ought to do are just not going to get elected, in my opinion, anyway, because it's going to be tough. We need to be people need to completely change their way of life. Fundamentally, we need to stop driving around in fossil fuel cars. We need to stop generating electricity with fossil fuels. We need to be completely renewable and sustainable today, you know, and that ain't going to happen. There's an article on our website that describes the amount of money it would cost to switch over to fossil fuel generation of just of electricity. No, switch over from fossil fuel to renewable. And it would cost $9 billion a day. That's roughly the cost of building a new power station. The world needs to spend that for the next 30 years. The total cost would be $100 trillion. Countries are just not prepared. You know, that's huge expenditure, which, you know, countries have got other priorities. So I'm not optimistic about where we're going, to be honest.
Nice.
Well, it's your fault. It's my fault. It's all our fault because we don't do what we should be doing, which is voting for green parties that say we're going to close all. You know, people vote in the traditional way. They carry out. They want their lives. They want to go on holiday. They want to drive to work. And I'm just as guilty as everybody else, although I'm making it what I think is an effort. but it's not enough.
Yeah, never is.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I think it's the biggest issue we've got. I mean, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is what's in the news.
Yeah.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine is trivial compared to the problem we've got with climate change. Really, I think. But who would agree with me? Not many people, because we're afraid of losing our freedom. We want our democracy. We want we don't want war. We want peace. And Putin seems like a crazy man who wants war. And that's, for most people, that's what matters. Climate change is in the future some way off. And we're human beings. We think about tomorrow. We think about, the next summer holiday. We think about our lives, our children. And the fact that climate change is going to cause huge problem for our children is not the way people look at it. They think about, buying them clothes and getting them to school and stuff.
Yeah, they don't see the emergency.
Politicians should be the guys who are dealing with the long-term issues, but either they have to get elected, so they can't do what's necessary, or like China, for instance, where they don't have to get elected because it's a one-party state, they've got a dictatorship, but still they spend they're the world's, I think they're either the world's largest fossil fuel user or second largest, soon will be largest. I think the United States is the largest. So they ain't going to change because they want their country to be rich.
Yep.
Here's a huge problem. Yep. Not to mention all the other issues like the environmental issues. So what are we doing to wild animals and plants and diseases? I mean, it's huge.
Yes.
It's easy to become depressed with all this. You have to try, don't you? You have to do your best. Even if, like me, you think you ain't going to succeed, you have to try. There's no other way. And be as optimistic as you can be, even though fundamentally I'm not optimistic. You have to try. I mean, you can be optimistic in the little things, like my podcast, for instance. I'm optimistic with that. It ain't going to change the world. It ain't going to achieve a huge amount, but I'm optimistic I can do it. You have to do what you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. What else remained to be done, do you think, regarding like environmental actions? Like, what are you expecting from the government? Like, if there were like no rules of re-election and everything, what should be done?
No rules of re-election?
Because you told me that government have to please the citizens to be re-elected and to done things that will be re-elected. But if they were not this obstacle, what should they do?
If what?
If this obstacle, is that a word? Yeah. Sorry. If it was not this obstacle, what the government should do? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, they should put climate change as the top priority for every pound, every dollar that's spent. They should think, is this money helping to reduce our carbon footprint? Because there are multiple forces on government. For instance, if you have to make a choice between, for instance, building a new power station, a nuclear or wind farm power station, and giving money to people who are unemployed, or spending money on the health service. You know, how do you make those decisions? That's very difficult. It's a balance, isn't it? You've only got so much money. I mean, if you look at what happened in France, so you're a French lady.
Yes, I am.
You remember what happened? I was in France. Well, I was on the border between France and Switzerland in 2019, I think, when Macron introduced the tax on petrol.
Yes.
And I was there when the Gilets jaunes, the yellow-vested people came out. So where I was, near the hotel where I was living, there was a supermarket. It wasn't a Carrefour, it was one of the others. But anyway, and they closed the entrance, so cars could not go into the supermarket. I could because I was on foot. I hadn't got a car, so I walked past them and walked out again with no problem. I mean, and they did that because Macron was trying to add a tax to fossil fuels in order to pay for, the money that was going to, as I understand it, anyway, I could be wrong, I think the money he was trying to raise was intended to be spent on reducing climate change. I think that was the reason.
Well, that was to prevent people to use their car, because if it was more expensive, less people would want to use oil.
Well, I thought he'd said what was going to happen to the tax that was raised.
Yeah, that was both
yeah, both. But France is a huge country. A lot of people live in the countryside, and the public transport in most of France is rubbish, and therefore there is no public transport for them to get to work or to get to school or whatever, and they have to have their cars. So that collapsed, didn't it? And since then he's been even more unpopular than he was before. So it's he tried and he failed, as far as I can see. And,
yeah.
Will he be, if he continued, because he reversed that tax, didn't he? If he continued with the tax, I think he reversed it.
Yeah, he did that. Yeah.
Or even if it increased it, how likely would it be that he would be able to continue in office? I mean, now the next election is coming up. It's quite possible he'll be elected again.
Yeah.
But I don't know that he would have been. I mean, the Gilets jaunes have gone on to other things, haven't they?
Yeah, but I think that if he helped those people with financially helped them, they would be more willing to agree on this new rules about, because those people weren't against environmental policies. They were just out of money. I mean, they were just for them it was just today I don't have money to go to work if the oil is more expensive, so I can't deal with it. It's not.
But what could he have done? I mean, if he'd given them the money back, they would have just spent it on petrol. The only way to get around the problem is to build millions of electric vehicles. That's just not going to happen. That's not a short-term thing. We're trapped. In order to keep our civilizations going, we have to use fossil fuels. We have no choice.
Yeah.
Although, there are things you can do to reduce the issue. Like, for example, us two now, we're talking through, electronic means rather than travel into an event to talk face to face. So video conferencing is one step towards reducing fossil fuels usage. So there are things that can be done, but to change the whole of our industrial fossil fuel based economies is such a huge problem. It's just going to take many years. And that's the problem, because in those many years, climate change just carries on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just also have a question, but it's more like for me, because I don't understand how it's working here about recycling, because I don't know, like, I mean, in my accommodation, we don't recycle. There is only one bin, and that's the case for all of my friends who are living in like many different accommodation here in Coventry. So I was wondering, is recycle like a thing? Is it like mandatory to recycle? Like how it's working here?
So, as in France, the local council, local government provides, well, it's slightly different. In the UK, in Coventry, certainly, the local council provides different types of bin where people put their rubbish, and they provide three bins, and I think this is throughout the city. So one's for general waste, which is not recyclable and not food. They provide a second bin for stuff that's recyclable, but they limit what they consider to be recyclable to certain plastics. There are some plastics they won't take, and paper and metal containers, for example, drinks or food containers. And then there's a third bin, which is for food waste or plant waste. So stuff that can be degraded biologically. And as I understand it, in theory, every house should have access to those three different types of bin. Now, I guess if you're living in rented accommodation, the landlord might not have room or might not have accepted those bins because they don't. It's not a legal obligation. You're not obliged to do it. And some people refuse to do it. I mean, so my neighbour, for instance, said, well, we should be able to put everything in the same bin and the council should sort it out, you know, rather than us having to do all this work. Finally, his son persuaded him that he should be using the recycle bin. So he does that now. Mm-hmm. So some people are just, you know, they just object to being told what to do. And they don't want to bother. But yeah, so what you could do if you're in a situation, if you're in rented accommodation and you haven't got the three bins, you could ask your landlord if it's possible to get these three bins. It depends what space there is, what room there is. I mean, some property just hasn't got enough room.
Yeah,
to
but
store the bins.
You know, big thing. So that would like need lots of bins. Like, well, I don't know why, but like all of my friends who live in different accommodation, no one have something to recycle. It breaks my heart to like waste everything in the same bin.
Well, at the moment, as you probably know, the people who collect the refuse are on strike.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
And so at the moment, they're only collecting the general household waste. They're not collecting the food waste or the recyclable waste. But you can take, if you have large plastic bags, you could put your recycling into the plastic bags and you could take it to one of the few centralized places where they accept it. But most people don't do that. I don't do that. So, yeah, I mean, so at the moment things are a bit unusual. But in the future, once that strike is over, I guess if your landlord won't ask the council for a recycling bin, then again, you could collect your own recycling, but where you would then deliver that, because those temporary centres are going to close, I don't know. It might be possible, but I can't see many people doing that.
And why are they on strike?
Money. They want more. They want more money. They want more cash.
Okay.
I mean, usually these things come down to money in people's pockets. We've had a lot of cutbacks. So local government, for instance, city councils all over England and probably all over the UK, because of the financial crisis in the 2000s, when the banks collapsed and all that, the central government has vastly reduced the payments it makes to local governments. So local governments have cut back their services, and that's continuing. That will continue. So, yeah, it's very, very difficult. And that doesn't help because, if we're going to solve climate change, we need money. And these are tight, there isn't spare money, basically. Governments had to cut back. And, times are very hard. People's wages have gone down, well, compared to the real price of things.
Yeah.
And that's going to get worse because as a result of COVID and all the communications issues, inflation is taking off. It's not a good time.
Yeah.
However, having said that, people can still make changes in their lives to both reduce their carbon footprint and reduce the costs. Buying food that can be recycled or buying food without all the plastic packaging, you can get cheaper food that way if you try. People can walk instead of using their cars. There are things that can be done. And that's part of what this CovCAN is trying to do, is educate people about what they can do to both reduce your carbon footprint and save money and get healthier as well.
Yes.
That's what we want to do.
Well, thank you for answering all my questions.
Okay.